Hi, it's Loui Kannikoski from Bhagwan Marine. Looking forward to chatting with Tim on Euros Hartley's Finding the Front. Speak to you shortly.
Welcome to Euros Hartley's Finding the Front, where we get to know the people who front some of Western Australia's leading companies, providing you with real insights into the way they think and approach things, both in business and in life. So get the volume adjusted in your car or your headphones sorted and settle in for a great story. Here's your host, Tim Banfield.
Hey everyone, and great to have you join us for another fantastic episode of Euros Hartley's Finding the Front. Please contact Euros Hartley's or visit our website at www.euroshartleys.com if you'd like to learn more about the financial services we provide. Whether it be wealth management, corporate finance or institutional sales, we are available to assist. Our special guest for this episode is Loui Kannikoski, the founder, managing director and CEO of leading marine solutions provider Bhagwan Marine, stock code BWN. Bhagwan Marine operate across the oil and gas, resources, civil construction, logistics and defence industries. And what a story it is. After leaving school at age 14, Loui began working in his family crayfishing business, taking over the business in the mid-1980s. In the late 90s, Loui expanded the family business by changing tack somewhat and entering the oil and gas industry as a service provider. In 2000, Bhagwan Marine was formed and some 24 years later listed on the ASX just last year. Loui tells it as he sees it, and there are not too many journeys around like this one. It is such a ripper. So without further ado, it gives me a huge pleasure to introduce to Euros Hartley's Finding the Front the founder, MD and CEO of Bhagwan Marine, and all-round great bloke, Loui Kannikoski. Hi Loui, and thanks for joining us on Euros Hartley's Finding the Front. It's great to have you on the show. There's so much to talk about on the life and career you've had, particularly in the marine services space over so many years. And it's, just doing some research, and I'm just really excited to have the chat. So look, thanks a lot on behalf of all of us at Euros Hartley's. Thanks a lot for joining us.
No worries, Tim. It's a pleasure at this stage. I'll see how you feel at the end of it.
As I said, I've been doing a bit of reading, and I noted that you grew up in this beautiful northwest place of Geraldton. But I just want to go back in time a little bit and start talking about things that have framed you over time. And your mum and dad, how did they arrive and their background and where they started?
Okay, well, I'll go back to, Dad was obviously out of Finland. He left Finland just after the Second World War. Dad was one of those guys that got into the Second World War, at a young age or underage. I think lied about his age, got into the Second World War, and I think they fought alongside the Germans against Russia and came second, and he always says that. And the other thing he used to say was he was the fastest runner in the Finn Army as well. But anyway, so then he got into the Merchant Navy straight after the war, and they, amongst other things, they ended up in Geraldton, carting lead between Geraldton and Sydney for a couple of years, and for some reason he really, really liked Geraldton, and they got to Sydney at one point, and he paid off the ship, and I've got to say that, so he didn't just, sneak off the ship. He paid off. He'd always said, and he was sort of proud of that fact. Spent a couple of weeks in King's Cross and ran out of money, and thought he'd make his way back to Geraldton, which he did, and then, funnily enough, met my mother, whose parents were born in Croatia, in a pub, funnily enough, and hit off a bit of a relationship, and ended up together, and Dad went lead mining for a very, very brief period, thought he was going to be okay at that, but went broke quickly, and decided to get into the fishing, and coming from Finland, Finland's got a big marine background, and, they call it the country of lakes and blah, 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 but anyway, Dad started fishing in the early 50s.
You were born and bred effectively in Geraldton.
Yeah, no. So I was born in 1960. Yeah. Sadly now that's a long, long, long time ago. But I'm the youngest of I've got two sisters and myself, so I'm the young one of the family. Sadly, my father passed away in 2007, but my mum's now 94 in May.
Oh, wow!
She'll be really happy. I've told people about that. But that's where that history comes from, if you like.
Oh, well, I just wanted to dwell a little bit on this because your dad, Loui, he clearly had a big impact on you in early life because you ended up joining him in the workforce. But to come out from Finland and to then establish himself in Geraldton back in the 1950s, it took a lot of courage.
Yeah, I think there was a fairly reasonable sized Finn population in Geraldton at the time.
Right.
So there was quite a few fishermen from Finland. So I think that's how he felt comfortable in Geraldton.
Yes.
So and then went into the fishing industry, and in about 1970, Dad used to have quite a few arguments with the fisheries department. Altercations, I'll say. So anyway, at that point in time,
he had a view, did he?
They had a love-hate relationship. I'll just say that. But Dad had a difference of opinion. It goes back to when the licenses were handed out. Dad started pre-licenses, and
yes,
when they brought those things out, people were doing things like extending. It was all to do with 3 pots per foot of the vessel length, and
right.
And people were extending boats madly to get more pots.
More pots.
And Dad's idea of the extensions didn't agree with the fisheries on timing and stuff. But he said, I'm always going to work that number of pots. So he had a couple of times that there was altercations, and he was told he wasn't allowed to fish for a period of time. So 1970 we moved to Perth. Dad started importing car wash machines from Finland, which he was the first person in Australia to bring in automatic car wash machines. So that was quite a different time. But we spent close to nearly 5 years in Perth between 70 and 75.
So just there, Loui, you went to school in Ellendale Primary, I understand, for a period of time, and then finishing off your schooling while they're Manning, and then finishing off in Korean Glades. But how did you find school? Did you enjoy it?
Well, look, they didn't. I always tell people they didn't know about ADHD in those days, and if I didn't get the cane most days, it was very unusual. But and it was my report cards were always the same, easily led, all this sort of stuff. So myself and the headmaster used to get along very, very well.
You saw each other frequently? I
was going to say, yeah, that's probably more to the point. We just seen ourselves frequently. Whether we got along, we didn't get along that well. So at the age of, I was about 3 months short of my 15th birthday, so in 1975, it was decided that the best plan of attack was for me to go fishing with Dad, and we'd got our licence back that particular year for the start of the whites, and so I was 14 and 10 months or 9 months or whatever it was, and went fishing. So it was sort of, think about it now, you see 14 or 15-year-olds, you don't think they're ready for work, which I wasn't as well. But so that was the start of my working life with Dad. It actually started earlier than that because he used to make us work at the car wash machines that he imported, so it was like slave or child labour, I should say. It was legal in them days, I think. But,
okay, so you left Perth. The family packed up and went back up to Geraldton.
Yeah, shifted back to Geraldton in 1975.
1975, and you started with Loui in the business.
Yeah, correct. So I think I just became part of the boat,
crew.
I was, definitely working as crew, but very young at that age. So, people were used to tell me that I was just part of the boat because I came with Dad, so to speak. But
yeah, that period of time in the crayfishing industry, you touched on it earlier, but licenses had come in, but the quotas weren't in, which for the listener, there is the quota regime within the crayfishing industry now, which has changed the way that the crayfishing industry operates. But at your period of time then, we're talking about licenses. How did you find that whole existence? Because it's quite early starts, long days, a lot of time on the water.
Yeah, and I suppose when I started, it was really just to get out of school. I wasn't a lover of fishing at the time. It was just this is the way I get out. And it didn't take long for me to actually love fishing, and love the work and the camaraderie and all that sort of stuff. And back in those days, everyone was pretty, you played pretty hard. I mean, obviously I was at a very, very young age, and as time went on, the fishing industry was, full of characters, I'll say. There was, there was a lot of likeable rogues and, different things were happening. I mean, there was a lot of parties going on and all that sort of stuff. But when we were working, certainly through the high times of the seasons, you worked really hard and you didn't miss any days. At that stage, it was more of a lifestyle type business. We didn't understand, we just fished for the numbers. We had to catch the most. It was a real hunting type operation. It took us years to work out that, we were sometimes fishing for, little or going backwards. We were just trying to get to a number.
Yes.
To be, catch the most in the industry. So, it was only till, much later on after our time in fishing that the quotas came in and, people started treating it more like a business than a lifestyle. But
yes.
We had a great time. I always tell people that, going to the Abrolhos Islands and those sorts of things was, it was just a lot of fun. We used to work hard. And then as the season died off, there was a lot of parties and, inter-island footy games. And, you think back about those things and, the inter-island footy games, for instance, was played on an oval full of coral rocks. And if you fell over, there was a lot of blood involved. There was a lot of drinking and blood, and people used to do some really, really strange things. But it was a great life. We really, or I, certainly enjoyed it. I think it's, now it's, the industry is really in really good shape nowadays. The quota systems certainly helped it. The crayfish nowadays, I don't know if you go to Rottnest or places like that, you can virtually chuck a pot anywhere and you'll catch some crays. And
yes.
That's been created through the quota system because fishermen are more methodical about what they catch and when they catch them, for the prices and
yes,
those sorts of things. So, and I was one that was against the quota system at the start because we just didn't like change. And, I was more, it was more about the hunt. But I've seen that over time the quota system's been a really good tool for the fishing industry as far as it's, if they do it correctly now, it'll go forever.
Yes,
so
yeah.
I once said on the ABC, and I probably don't know whether I should say this or not, but I said that they're an ocean-going cockroach, so, they'll survive anything. But now that I'm out of the industry, I can say what I like. Anyway.
Well, and thanks for sharing that, because it's a really interesting point, because it really was the foundation of where you started. By 1986, you took over the family operation from Loui, your dad?
Yeah, so Karen and my wife and I, took over the operation. I started to run the vessel, and that was mainly through, Dad and I had certainly had a love-hate relationship. I think, if Dad said black, I said white, so it wasn't, we weren't bosom buddies, but, obviously I've always had and always did have a great deal of respect for Dad, but we'd never seen eye to eye very often. And I think that a lot of that came from, the very early days of, 14, 15, going to work. It was younger than that. As I said, in the car wash days, we was working at 9 and 10. We'd go to school, straight after school, be at the car wash and, for a period of time. And then even at the start of the fishing industry, we were doing the same. We were fishing from whatever time, we'd get up at midnight or between midnight and 5 and get home and then go to the car wash. So we worked pretty hard.
Yes.
But that was, I don't regret those times. I think it was, I'll say it's character building. Others can say all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But no, so Dad and I, virtually through my whole life, and still is, up until, last year, was a family business. And, Mum and Dad certainly were a major part of that. But getting back to it, in 86, Dad and I got to a point where it was either I was going to leave or he was. And Mum was the, and still is the matriarch of the family. She just told Dad what he was going to do. And he would disagree with that. If he was here, he would be giving me the worst look. But it was simply the case. So it was either, Dad got off the boat or I did. And Mum decided that he got off the boat. And so Karen and I took over from that point.
Well, just pause there. you've mentioned Karen a couple of times. For the listener, Karen is Louis's beautiful wife of 40 years. Now, you guys met in 1984, so just before you took over the boat or the operation. Just put some context around that. She was in Geraldton as well?
No, Karen came from Perth, so there was a group of us in Geraldton, crayfishing deckhands at the time, that decided we were going to go on a ship cruise in the off-season. So our off-season was from June the 30th through to November the 15th. But anyway, it was in July that we thought we'd go on the ship cruise, and at the start of it there was about 10 people, going. That whittled down to 3 at the death knock, and so 3 of us went on the ship cruise, and we were on a flight across from Perth to Sydney to get on the beautiful old Fair Star, the fun ship, which most people, unless they're my age, won't remember. But anyway, and we met Karen, and 2 of her girlfriends were on the same flight. Unbeknown to us, they were going on the same ship cruise. And anyway, we got to Sydney and got to the hotel where we were staying, and the 3 of us guys were sitting there going, what are you going to do in Sydney? So straight to King's Cross. And anyway, we met the girls off the plane down in the reception and said, you coming? And they did, and that's where we met to start with. And then obviously we found out we were all on this, going on this same 2-week or 15-day ship cruise. And for some unknown reason, we sort of hit it off from that point, and been sort of together ever since.
Obviously, you guys were together in 1986 when you decided that, well, your mum decided that you were going to be the boss of the boat.
Yeah, I mean, I was pushing to be the boss of the boat from when I was 14 and 9 or 10 months or whatever it was. So, I was never happy being on the back deck. I thought I was trying to push Dad off at any stage that I could. So, I always, and previous to that, Dad he'd do 5 or 6 days a week, and so I wanted to drive the boat. I wanted to be in charge of it. But then we sort of got given the reins to do it, and which was was good. Dad sort of stepped back a little bit. I look back and think if we had in with the beauty of hindsight, we should have probably bought another license, and because Dad was only in his 50s at that point, so it was probably too young for him to retire. But he was very famous for saying, or very, when I say famous to us, saying he was the oldest messenger boy in Geraldton. He used to run around doing jobs. For us, and then that led into obviously the oil and gas industry later on. But
oh, great! What a great story. So onwards and upwards from here. So as you mentioned, then the oil and gas industry started to evolve in the 90s, and it was in around 1998 that you and Karen are running the business. You're running it from home, effectively, taking the boat, a couple of boats at that stage?
No, it still was just running. One. It was one cray boat.
One cray boat, your only cray boat, taking it in and out of the Geraldton Harbour. But you got door knocked to see if it could be used as a support vessel.
Yep.
For at that time, a company called Total Marine.
Yeah, correct. We had it was quite. So it's virtually in the start of our off season when we used to I always felt that we needed to do something in the off-season apart from just fix the gear and the boat and the rest of it. So we used to do some charters out of Geraldton. But I had an old fisherman who was working, then got out of fishing a lot earlier, but was working for Total Marine. A guy called Harry Bingham came to town with 2 other guys and asked us if we'd like to put the boat into the oil and gas while they were doing a refit on Total Marine's vessel. I sort of said, I don't know, all I knew was about crayfishing at that stage. I didn't realise there was an oil industry up north. Funnily enough, a lot of the platforms got built out of Geraldton, which I was seeing getting done, but didn't take a lot of notice for some reason. Centre of the universe was crayfishing. And at that stage, the Bhagwan was the biggest, probably the biggest cray boat on the West Australian coast, and being in its configuration would suit for a replacement for their vessel while they were getting refitted. So that was the start, or that was our entry into that.
By 2000, you and Karen decided to be available for the oil and gas industry to use on a walk-in basis.
So in 1998, when we did go up, venture into the industry, we virtually took our boat up and to replace Total Marine's boat, and we took Total Marine's vessel back to Fremantle. And then when the boat had done its refit, we returned it and went and picked our vessel up. And when we done that, one of the guys from Totals asked us if we were prepared to, they said, we've got a fair bit of work coming up. Would you like to, keep going with the boat in the industry? And it was at a time that, I'd been 25 years, I think, crayfishing at that point in time, and I was probably a little bit jaded by it all and thought, oh, well, the change is good. And I was really quite astounded at the oil and gas industry, at, things that they were doing like directional drilling and all sorts of different things that I'd never ever heard about. So I was quite taken by it all. And so we spoke to Totals and I went spoke to Dad and said, at that stage you could lease your licence out. So we decided to lease it out in 98 and stay in the industry or go into the industry. And I think, as I said to you earlier, the first year I think I did 280 days offshore or on the boat and still managed about 60,000 k's in the car. So Karen didn't see me a great deal, but that was sort of our life, and I think that's why we've been able to be together for 40 years because every time she gets the shits with me, she tells me to go away for a couple of weeks. So anyway, COVID was very difficult. But anyway.
That's interesting. So you spent pretty much the largest part of the year on the water with that vessel servicing the Northwest Shelf. Was that where it was?
Yeah, it was mainly Thevenard Island with Chevron or WA Oil that was operating Thevenard Island, and we ventured to Barrow Island a few times, but it was mainly around Thevenard, and we were doing things from running people to platforms. There was 9 platforms up there, so we were running people and equipment and gear to just small amounts, because it was a small boat, so there's not a lot you could carry. But we're involved in things like having sandblasting equipment and painting and maintenance on the platforms and these sorts of things. So it was a really wide range of tasks that we were performing, and things like downhole wire lining where they go down and set new valves and all sorts of them. These were the things that were impressing me. I didn't know how you could operate what they called subsea tools down wells, and I was astounded by it all, but it didn't take much to do that, by the way. But
this time you spent in your first year gave you a total insight into this world, and you could see from that point onwards, you come home for those few weeks of that year you had left and said, Karen, I think we're onto something. Yeah,
it wasn't that. While I orchestrated, I sort of come home. It was to do with certainly Mum and Dad had a large part to play in it. I came home and spoke. There was nothing that we did without the whole. The 4 of us talking about it.
Yeah.
But, Dad, I'm still amazed that Dad allowed me to have sort of free rein with everything that he'd built. I couldn't understand that for a long time because I wasn't the easiest of childs, and anyway, as I stated earlier, but. He also seen something there, and so we went forward and started to design or plan and design a boat, which we built in October of 2000 was commissioned or completed, and we did that on the spot market. So it was more to do with just jobs that were available. It wasn't done for a contract, but at that time the industry seen it. It was at a time, and this is in this very small end of the market as well. This is not the the rig tender or the big boat market.
No, sure.
The smaller stuff. So industry seen it and said, oh, well, these guys have sort of put their money where their mouth is.
They're committed.
Yeah, and so around about the time that the boat was commissioned, we decided that we were going to start our company. We thought we'd done enough with Total Marine. We'll start our own business, and life's going to be easy. And as I say, we did a lot of things when I look back, there was a lot of naivety to it, but we were fortunate, I think, that we had the right outlook and, put our money where our mouth was, and industry sort of accepted us. So,
well, you got a contract pretty quickly through Apache Energy.
Yeah, we won a contract in 2000 with Apache for a field vessel, and proud, I was very proud of that contract. And we had that contract for 16 years, but we built a boat specifically for that contract, and we went on to build another 2 boats for that. Another one. As I say, I was very proud that we had that contract for 16 years.
Yeah,
I was very disappointed when we lost it, but there was all sorts of reasons for that. But but we're still doing a lot of work. Apache's now, this is at Varanus Island, so it's now owned by Santos, and we still continue on working for those guys.
Right. Well, I mean, if we just stay with this 2000, because it's a huge point in your life, because this was when Bhagwan Marine was established, in essence, in the year 2000. The question for everyone is, why the name Bhagwan? How did that evolve? Where did it come from? You mentioned it was the name of the cray boat that you had in your original business.
Yep.
But even that, what's the significance?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, in the fishing, our fishing time in fishing, I should say, we're involved in what we used to call the Big Bank Run, which used to we'd mainly work out of Kalbarri, and it was mass migration of crayfish. And anyway, there was a group of 4 of us, or me included, so another 3 fishermen. We'd work together through those periods. So we could. It was very difficult to try and find out where these particular animals were at the time, so it was good to work in a group. But we called one of the guys, who wasn't me, sadly, but the guy that used to catch the most, a guy called Alan Kelly, the guru, and it came from back in the 90s, or I think it was might have been even the late 80s, that there was a group called the Orange People, and the self-proclaimed Bhagwan Rajneesh was the leader of this group, and I think it's still in America somewhere, as a sort of religious sect. And anyway, but it came from Alan Kelly built the boat called the Bhagwan, and then we bought the boat off him in, I think it was about 1994 or somewhere around there, and then we started in the industry, and when we decided to go by ourselves in 2000, we thought, well, everybody knows this is Bhagwan Marine, we'll keep the name. And Bhagwan's actually a god in India. I think it's number 2 god of luck, or whatever.
Right.
And it's been astounding, because we've been explaining the story ever since. And it's funny, I sit in all sorts of places and I hear people telling the story, and it's never quite correct. And especially if there's a couple of drinks involved, it gets embellished on. But it's been a really lucky story for our family, and so I really. I think we've been really fortunate that through a bit of fun and other things, we thought it was a good name to call the company, and it's been a success ever since. So.
Great story. Well, on you went, and Bhagwan just started rolling on. The first 10 years went pretty quickly, and I think oil and gas sector started to evolve. It changed from projects from construction phase to production phase, and Bhagwan continued to evolve with it. Is it fair to say?
Yeah, look, I think we with the industry where we've seen it, I'll never forget. I had a good friend of mine, still is. I said to him in the early days when we built our first boat, I said, look, all we want to do is get to about 5 boats, and if I get any more than that, you can shoot me, and so he's been chasing me with a gun ever since. But,
we'll get to how many vessels you've got now in a minute.
Yeah, but so with that, it was we just seen that we sort of grew with the amount of effort that was going into the industry, I suppose, and this is. And then we knew that Gorgon and Wheatstone and Impex and all these other projects were coming up in around 2010 and that sort of stuff. But that we grew probably to about 40 or 50 vessels up until about 2009 or 10. Just through the amount of work that was going on in the oil and gas industry, and mainly out of Dampier.
Yes. That's quite pivotal, really, when we look at Bhagwan continued to evolve on the back of that. So in 2009, to gain that presence in Dampier, you acquired Del Marine, to get to service the oil and gas market from that base. And it's for the listener, as we go through, you'll see how Bhagwan has evolved to have basically shore bases around Australia, which enables the business to provide the services to the marine industry that it does. But the first one here in this instance was Del Marine. And that same year, you're awarded the contract to support the Gorgon Gas Project, one of the biggest, or one of the world's largest natural gas projects around.
Yeah, look, the reason for with Del Marine, so Del Marine was created, Del Board started that business. Dal was involved in the mermaids before, well before the float, before they floated. So he'd been in the industry for quite a while, but came from the fishing industry. So I knew Dal quite well, and at that point, 2009 came along, and Dal, had decided that for all sorts of reasons that he'd had enough, and wanted to get out at that point. So we negotiated between us, and we were able to buy the company, which was great. And both Dal's sons came, to work for us, and and Dal's business was mainly in the inshore boats, servicing the offshore boats, if you like. So we were doing a lot of the same things, and it was a bit of a really good add-on for us at the time. So, it seemed like a logical choice.
Yes.
It gave us a base actually in Dampier, because everything was run out of Geraldton at that time. So it was just a good opportunity at the time. And Dal was running it, he was doing it extremely well with it. So I think that business came with about 17 or 18 vessels at the time. So it was, quite a big deal. Certainly a big deal for us.
Pretty significant. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's good to talk about it because it was transformational for the business at the time.
Yeah, like I say, I'd like to tell people that we had a big plan, but we sort of didn't. It was those sorts of things came as an opportunity at the time, and being very close. We were working very close with Dal, in those days anyway, and it seemed like natural progression for us to, go and buy the business out. And we as I say, that guy with the 5 vessels, he was certainly chasing me with a gun at that point. So, anyway,
so with the Gorgon gas project in hand as well, 2011 arrives, and a private equity group, Catalyst, comes in and takes a 33% stake in Bhagwan Marine, along with your current chairman, Anthony Wolves, who joined the business. Yeah,
so just, around that time, we seen as a family we'd done about as much as we could, and we seen the big construction era coming up with all of those projects, and we thought, well, we need to do something. We need to, look at how we're going to grow the business without, putting it just at complete risk with families, with just borrowing more money. So we spent about 12 months. If you speak to the guys from Catalyst, they'll tell you that it was one of the most drawn-out affairs they were involved in, because we took a long time to make the decision to go ahead with Catalyst coming in, and Anthony Wolves came in alongside Catalyst and co-invested. So, I think it was 33% with Anthony. It was close to 40% that we sold at that point in time, and which proved to be a good time, because I think in 2012, around that period, we got to well over 100 vessels. So we went out with Catalyst's support and the money that they invested into the company. We were able to grow the business, and I think we got to around 1,000 people, through that really high.
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, people used to. It was a funny time for me, because I keep telling people that I just make the waves, and Karen was the one that smoothed it all out. And so what I meant by that is I didn't think about how much money was involved or anything along those lines, and I didn't sort out in those days we were able to pay all the bills. Everything was going along really well. But it was just a really, really good time, and really exciting that we could do those things. And as I say, Catalyst and Anthony sort of took us to a different level again, and put a bit more process into the place, I suppose.
Yeah.
We formalised a board, even though the board was, my mother, my father and Karen and myself was virtually the board pre that, but put a lot of formality, or a bit more formality, into the place. One of the other things that was a good reason for the success of the business, we always looked at at having the right levels of certification and these sorts of things.
Yes.
And safety was a major part of it. We always wanted the best equipment we could possibly get, and so I think we had the right outlook all the way through, and the industry sort of seen that, and we've had certainly our ups and downs, but that was our intention.
Yes.
And I always tell people that it was an industry, that and I sort of think about this a lot, but we didn't get in it to get out of it, if you know what I mean. We didn't sort of think that we were just going to make a lot of money and sell.
Yes.
And I don't know whether that's naivety or as well or not, but I tell people even now that we didn't the things we've done along the way. I had one stage someone said I'd been given this check for all of this money and I still haven't seen it, but it was this massive amount of money. But to us, it's always been about the business and trying to try and create something that that we can all be proud of, and I think we've done pretty well at that.
Oh. Well, at that point in time, when you've jumped to 140 vessels and 1,000 people, obviously things had changed a lot for both you and Karen. And it didn't stop there with the support of Catalyst and Anthony. You went through to set up a presence in the Northern Territory and Darwin with Workboats Northern Australia. By 2014 and 2015, this was an interesting period of time because for the first time we saw a downturn in oil prices, which reduced the work across the energy sector, which I'm interested in your views here because, how did that, for a business that had scaled up so much, how did that affect you?
Yeah, well, I think the important thing at that time, we were 100% oil and gas related. So we did very little that was outside the oil and gas industry, if anything at all. So at the start of the downturn, we knew that the construction era was going to come off. We knew that Wheatstone, Gorgon was, Impex and all these things were going off, and there'd been other projects that had got shelved, if you like. So we'd seen the downturn coming there, but what we didn't see was the worldwide oil shock, if you like, which impacted us. And in 2015, we also bought a company in the UK called MTS.
Marine and towage services.
Yeah, which was a similar sort of business to ourselves, more involved, I suppose, in ocean towing, throughout Europe and Middle East and even out to South America and these sorts of places. But and the reason, just quickly behind that, was so when we seen the downturn in the construction industry in Australia, we could move fleet internationally. And at one point, we had 6 boats working in Sakhalin Island in Russia for 2 years. So we have been, we've done things all over the place, but that was the reasoning behind that. So try and explain that time between 2011 and 15, if you like, before the downturn was starting to impact us. We did have a hell of a time building the business, and it was very exciting. I remember there was one time we went to Europe to buy 2 boats and come home with 3. I thought that was, really good. So Catalyst, we're very good partners of Bhagwan, and Anthony Walls is still with us. He's just part of the furniture now. He'll hate me saying that, but he's been with us, since 2011. So
yes,
he's just part of the big family.
And so I think when you look at that, though, there was in 2015, and you've alluded to it in essence, there was a deliberate strategy to then diversify and expand the offering. And then you looked at what the clients that you had or the customers you had and what else could you provide them outside of oil and gas and other customers. And that you started looking at ports, resources, civil construction, defence, those other areas that you weren't servicing.
Yeah, I suppose, the reason, through the downturn we went from, revenue, we went in the first year of the downturn, I think we dropped about 40% of our revenue, which was a massive shock. And we seen that, we had to diversify into other areas to try and, to get that revenue back. And, not all of it. We knew we were going to get, or it was going to take us a while to get all of it. But so we seen what else was out there. And as far as I was concerned, if it needed something that floated, we could help. But so we went into inshore construction, and as you said, we'd moved into Darwin at that point through Workboats Northern Australia, and we were involved in port construction up there with with a few projects through Impex and these sorts of things that were set up, ConocoPhillips and these other inshore oil and gas projects, onshore I should say. So we were supplying tugs and barges, with cranes on them and that sort of stuff to help the construction. And then I think it was in about 2015 that we also bought MTD out of
Queensland,
Queensland, which was all mainly inshore construction and, river works. And, one of the things that we did over there is, Kingsford Smith Drive, we did the expansion, or we did the marine works for the expansion on Kingsford Smith. And I always tell people that particular project was putting 2 lanes out into the river, expanding that particular road. And I think Australia's got a bit of land, while we're reclaiming back out in the river. But that was a good project. But so we decided that we had to diversify, and
yes,
and now with the business now is completely different to what it was back in that 2013, 14, or that early days.
Well, you also established your subsea division at that point as well.
Yeah, that was so we seen that as a good idea at the time, even though we didn't really understand the impact of the downturn. So we went and invested in subsea, which we invested a lot of money at the time, and then we didn't see the fruits of that for quite a few years. So the downturn for us went for about 7 years. So it went from virtually 2015. We were still having the impacts into the early 20s, and then COVID come along, which was a whole other story. But so it was a really tough time, and we had to diversify. We had to make a lot of changes, through that particular period, which has transformed the company quite dramatically.
One of the points through that period, and you that period of time was, and I imagine this would have been a very, very big decision, a major decision in the scheme of Bhagwan's life. But in 2018, you decided you're going to move headquarters out of Geraldton to Perth, and that was taking you out of your comfort zone in Geraldton and into Perth, where it was just to bring you closer to your clients. But just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was a really tough decision. I mean, when we started the business back in the early days, we knew at some point, I was driving to Perth 2 or 3 times a week, most weeks, and we knew at some point we would have to move, and then 2018 come along, and we thought, it's now time. We're struggling, struggling to keep in business and all the rest of it. So it's time to go, and it was a really tough decision. I remember when we made the announcement to our staff, what we used to say in Geraldton, our retention of people in Geraldton was amazing. It changed quite a bit when we came to Perth, but I used to always say, if you want to leave, you got to die. So we had a great retention of people in Geraldton, and it was a really hard decision. And to give you an idea, when we made the decision to come to Perth, I think only about 6 or 7 people came with us out of an office full of about 60 odd people. So
because you would have been a pretty big employer in Geraldton in that size.
Yeah, I think as I say, in our height, I think we were probably the biggest, or one of the biggest private employers in the town.
Yes.
So it was a really big deal for us to shift, and not only that was my we were born and bred and all that sort of stuff, but just moving. And I suppose when we first made the decision, we didn't realise how many people weren't going to come. We thought, but looking back, that's everybody, their hometown and where they'd rather be if they could. And I was the one that I would, had my head buried in the sand. I didn't want to go anywhere, but I got dragged out screaming and kicking. But at the end of the day, it was the right decision. And now we're, even though I've got great memories of town and, friends up there and all the rest of it, and especially I miss not having real easy access to the Abrolhos and all those sorts of things. We did it for all the right reasons, and we've slotted in quite well in Perth. And
it was transformational for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a massive change for the business. As I say, we didn't understand the impact. And one thing that I will say, when we were Geraldton based, it was the IP that we had up there with the people that were working for us was tremendous. And we came to Perth, had to replace virtually our whole finance team, commercial team, operational team. It was just a massive transformation. And they didn't understand where we moved straight into being a little fish in a big pond. At one stage, especially through COVID, it was the place was like a revolving door, but that was a big learning curve for us. coming, and has been all the way through. And, now I think we're pretty well situated and, understand it a lot better.
Well, the business did continue to grow and continue to move on. And I think what's interesting that came out of that period of time was in 2020, you bought back that Catalyst stake, the 33%.
Yep.
And from what I can gather, that downturn also started to change. The impact of oil prices was starting to, oil prices starting to come back, rigs were coming back online, and activity started to pick up in the oil and gas sector, plus you had already diversified.
Yeah, I think it was more, the more to, coming through that period, the world started to get busy. So not only Australian industry, like oil and gas and inshore construction and those sorts of things, the world started to get busy. And through that downturn, there was a massive number of, one of the reasons for the downturn too was an oversupply of marine assets, if you like. So through the downturn, a lot of those marine assets got laid up and cold stacked and actually scrapped. So what's happened now is that's actually caused a shortage of supply. So it's, now we're looking at trying to rebuild all that. But through that period, the world got busy. Inshore construction was busy. Offshore oil and gas started again. Maintenance, one of the things that happened through the downturn was companies had decided to, reduce the amount of maintenance that had been spent on, offshore assets. And
they put a pause on it.
And you can't do that for too long. And when it comes back with a vengeance. So all parts of our business, through all of the regions started to pick up. Subsea started to become busy again with subsea maintenance and all of these sorts of things. So going into sort of 2020, 21, we started to come out of this so-called downturn, and things started to get really busy again.
Well, you picked up you're engaged to assist in the construction of the new marina and facilities at the Port Hedland waterfront. That's in itself just started to show that things were turning.
Yeah, I mean, that was, just part of it. I mean, we were doing, that was mainly assisting in the dredging work that was happening up there in Port Hedland. We were doing stuff, Dampier started to do some pre-works for Scarborough and these sorts of things.
Yes.
And then Darwin started to get busy as well, and Darwin's still very busy. And then Queensland as well. Queensland with Hay Point, we were doing quite a lot of work there. So just things generally started to pick up, and then in 2019, I think it was, we won the maintenance contract in the Port of Melbourne, which sort of extended us, geographically, if you like.
So, Loui, at that point, what did your workforce reduce to prior to, say, that turning point? Had you cut right back again? Like, so you've gone from, say, 140 vessels and 1,000 staff to where did you cut right back?
Yeah, through them. So one of the things, I always say, when we were more of a family business, and even when we had Catalyst on board, the industry was very popular as far as financiers were concerned and that sort of stuff. So money was reasonably easy to get, and I never, it's one thing that I always regret saying, and I was talking to our relationship managers from our bank that we've had for many, many years only yesterday, saying that, one of the things I regret saying is, while the bank keeps giving it, I'm going to keep taking it. So,
right.
And the reason behind that is we got to a point where we were very high up in the money that we owed as far as our particular bank was concerned. I think we were number 2 at one point,
right?
Which I was sort of proud of at the time, but it's really good being at that point until they want their money back, and that becomes a real struggle. But what we were able to do through the downturn was through what we called non-core assets, or excess fleet, if you like, and also just straight cash flow, was we paid down a massive amount of debt, probably over half of what we owed at the time, or through that period. One thing that I'm really proud of is that no one took a haircut with us. It may have taken a bit of time, but we got all the money paid back. And, and that was a big deal, where a lot of marine companies didn't throughout the world. A lot of marine companies disappeared, and probably about 40 or 50% of our competition locally has gone through either acquisition or or virtually closing doors. So
Yeah.
it was a massive downturn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that puts it into context as to how you then have come out of that what's subsequently been an upturn from where you were. 2023, you got awarded a 5-year contract with a multinational oil and gas company, to provide services at their offshore gas processing platform. And then also in 2023, what was interesting with this industry is that you then discovered that you began undertaking work in the decommissioning part of the cycle for the oil and gas clients again. So, we've gone through a full turn here, and here we go into another phase.
Yeah, one of the things I'd mentioned earlier is we always had the intention of trying to set ourselves up, with the right certifications and all these sorts of things. And I suppose, we were fortunate enough to have MSAs with most of the major oil companies, so we've been able to operate as a tier 1 contractor, if you like, and in certain projects, just depending on their size and complexity.
Just for the listener, MSA,
Master Services Agreement. So
right.
Virtually, you have the terms and conditions all negotiated, so you don't have to go through those things on every time you do a job for a different client. So we had probably 90% of the major oil companies under MSA agreements, which was, we'd purposely done over the years to get ourselves into, that position of being a preferred supplier, I suppose. But anyway, it led us to get involved in still to this date, Australia's biggest decommissioning project, where we removed nine platforms, funnily enough, out of Thevenard Island, which is where we started. So,
that's the mackerels.
Yeah, virtually the Mackerel Islands. And so we were successful in that project as a tier 1 contractor to a major oil and gas supplier and or company. And, that we did, around 900,000 man hours offshore. We had 140 people working on a big deconstruction vessel, if you like, working 24/7 for 8 months. But we did just under 900,000 man hours offshore without an LTI, which is a major achievement.
Yeah.
We were extremely proud of, and so I see that as being a major success. But what it has done for the business is it holds us in very good stead going forward. Decommissioning by itself is touted as $40 to $60 billion worth of work coming up over the next 40 years. So, just in that aspect by itself is a major horizon for the company, and it'll probably lead in another question that you'll have for me with the public listing. But
well, I think that's where it followed. That's 2023, but 2024. Clearly, you've made the decision that the business was of a suitable scale, generating the correct amount of revenue and cash flow to be able to take on an ASX listing, in which you.
I was told it was easy, by the way.
Well, you retained a 40% ownership in the business, but quite clearly, you did a lot of chatting, a lot of discussing, to take the business public.
You can ask the senior guys in Euros, Hartley's or Euros back in the day. I think they spoke to me about 18 years ago about floating the business. So it was a sort of quite a long period of due diligence, if you want to call that, for 18 years.
Yes.
But we got to a point where we seen that with what we see coming up with the decommissioning part of the business, we talk about renewables, defence, and all these other things that we see through the diversity of our business. Opportunities, that it was a time that that we could look at the public market space, if you like, and they did tell me it was going to be easy. It was probably one of the hardest 18 months that I've been through. There was a lot of work getting done, and look, in saying that, I've got to thank all of our people that in our teams that were put under a lot of duress getting the information. It's not an easy thing to float a business, so. Our staff were astounding in the amount of support that they did. I'd like to take, get a pat on the back for it, but it certainly wasn't through me. It was through other people that did the hard work. I just sat out the front. But no, it was a big task, but we've seen that, due to the future we see coming up, which is, and I've said it, time and time again, it's probably, the brightest that I've ever seen it. And it's not for the next 5 years, it's, for the next 45 years. So, that's one thing that, and I thought when I say the team thought that it was a good time to be able to get access to, being a public company, for funding for the growth that we see coming up over the next decades, if you like.
And here you are now, a listed company. You've got clients across a range of industries, offshore oil and gas, where you're providing the vessels and services to support exploration, development and production activities. It's quite significant, this broad range of offerings now. Port operations, you've got Australian ports, including providing services like harbour towage, survey support, geotechnical support and infrastructure. You've got these strategically located facilities all over the country, and that's coming back to those acquisitions that have happened over the life of the business. It's sort of all come together to be a strategically located set of bases: Dampier, Brisbane, Darwin, Melbourne. And then you've got the civil construction side, which is bridges, ports, jetties and other marine infrastructure. You've got more than 900 employees and own and operate over 100 vessels. So, it's a significant business, significantly positioned for that future opportunity set, which, as you said, decommissioning, but renewables, that's another. Renewables is right in the topic of conversation for a lot of people at the moment, but the wind opportunity with the offshore turbines and that sort of thing. We talk about defence and security. But then there's also, as you pointed out earlier, the maintenance that's required. So, maybe you could just give us a bit of an insight into those other, we talked about the decommissioning, but, the other parts.
Yeah, look, as far as, renewables go, we're still unsure as the, my view is that they're going to go ahead. The projects, there's been, I think, 12 licences issued around the country between sort of Victoria, New South Wales, South Australia and WA. WA is always going to be involved because there's a bit of wind here. But we're just, unsure of the exact timing on when things are going to happen. There's a lot of, conversations around economics and all that sort of stuff. But my view is that they will go ahead, and we're doing some, some pre-survey works and those sorts of things. This year we've been quite busy actually out of the Bass Strait. But becoming a major part of the business, I'm still thinking that it's a few years away. From it getting involved in the maintenance once these things are installed. We'll obviously be involved in the installation side, not as installation people, but supporting the installation vessels and that sort of stuff, if you like. But that's just with renewables, you're looking at 20 and 30 year projects, things that once they're in, they're around for quite a long time, and our aim is making sure that we're involved in the maintenance.
Yeah,
and that's from I look at it from the smaller vessels, crew change vessels, to the bigger walk to work vessels. I don't see any reason for us not to be involved in those as well, because we're perfectly located, to be able to support those industries and or that industry, I should say. And we talk about strategic areas that we operate. We look at places where we see there's room to move, and there's New South Wales, South Australia, and Tasmania, for instance, that we're looking at currently. But that'll be done in we're not going to rush out and do anything in 2 minutes. So we're taking some measured approach to that, if you like. But decommissioning we do see as a big part of the future. What
about defence, Loui? Defence and security?
Yeah, defence, well, we've been operating, the Northern Territory with Defence and Border Force and these sorts of people for a long, long time through originally Workboats Northern Australia. And then what we hadn't mentioned is we bought Broadsword back in, I think, 2016. We've been operating with Border Force and Defence for quite a while. But, what we see happening out of South Australia and WA with AUKUS and these sorts of things, we've got a land base in Henderson down here in WA. So it should put us right in the thick of it. And that's another thing that we see is, just when we talk to the submarine people, they talk about the next 100 years, not the next 10 years or those sorts of things. So the exciting part for me or in that is that's the future of the business, to have these things going on for the next, decades. And that's part of the reason for the public listing and to give us opportunity at that growth, if you like.
Absolutely. Look, I can tell by your body language you're pretty excited about it. Like you can really see the upside that's ahead of the business going forward with all of the things that are potentially going to develop over time.
Yeah, look, I wish I was bloody 20 years younger, because this. It takes a lot of energy, and one of the pleasing things from my side, I suppose, is we've got a great team of people behind Karen and I, and we've been going hard for a long time, but we've got some great people coming up through the business, and it's probably, I got asked years ago, what do you want your legacy to be? And I didn't even know what that was at the time, and I'm still battling with it. But I think, the simplest way for me to put it is that, when Karen and I have been moved aside, if you like, that the people coming up below us and through the business, there's a great deal of future there. And one of the things that, both Karen and I are very proud of is those people that we've got coming through, and we've been able to give them training on the way through, if you like, and, open them up to a whole new world. And so that's where I see the growth of the business. It's just amazing. And I keep telling the younger guys, I wish, as I say, I wish I was 20 years younger. They're quite happy that I'm not. I think they're saying it's time for you to go. But we're not going anywhere anytime soon. I better reiterate. But no, it's really exciting. And I think for me, it's just easy to talk about because of all of these other things. And look, you can see what's going on in the world at the moment. There's things that certainly out of our control, but we're in an industry that's marine industry, and with oil and gas, for instance, I think it's not on the nose as much as it was as a couple of years ago. People still understand are understanding more so that it's going to be something that's going to be around for a while. We're going to need it. We do need it. We talk about renewables, but we need oil and gas to help with that, that transition, if you like. So the future is, for the business is really, really bright.
Oh, good on you, Loui. Look, it's just, when you think about it, you must pinch yourself when your dad pulled you out of school and said, "Come on, son, come and jump on the boat with me and I'll teach you how to crayfish."
Yeah, it was more to do with, as I think I said at the start, it was more to do with how the bloody hell do I get out of school? but
even so, that's where you ended up. Yeah. And now here you are, and it's shaped you over a long period of time to the position you're in now. And I know one of the things, I'm conscious of time, and it's not a bad way of sort of putting a bit of a wrap around this. But one of the things I've taken out of this is what is a tight knit family unit has evolved and evolved and evolved. And your mum's still around at 94. She'd be immensely proud. I know Karen and yourself have obviously seen the ups and downs, and here you are now running a business that has that succession plan in it, that has that opportunity and that blue sky opportunity with defence and decommissioning and maintenance and the other things that are going to evolve, just like they did when you put that first boat to work in 2000. But now you've got all that infrastructure around you to take advantage of it. It's been a good story, and I think, I just think you should be very proud. You must feel very proud about it.
Yeah, we are. And I think what we really work hard at, and certainly we don't always get it right. And there'll be a lot of people out there that'll attest to that. But, one thing that we really do believe in and we try and promote through our business is that culture that everybody does mean something. It doesn't matter where they sit in the business. I learned years and years ago that the business that we were able to create was ours, and if it was 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that was our decision, and we really loved it. I actually used to find it quite weird when people were happy to have a weekend off, and I didn't know what they were talking about. But then you work out everyone's got their own universe. But look, through more so Karen, I suppose, the culture's been extremely important. and people's we get impacted on a daily basis with the amount of people that we've got now with their own issues, and we try and make sure we're there for them. And as I say, we haven't always got it right, and but that's been our intention. And one of the things that we're trying to carry forward is that family ethic, if you like. And
Yes.
I've always had the view that it doesn't matter. Well, it's probably sound naive as well, but I don't. You got to try hard. As bigger the business gets, you still got to try and hold on to that fabric that that the people within your teams and throughout the business, no matter what they do, mean something.
Yeah.
And one of the concerns I suppose we have even going forward is how do we make sure that that's retained? Because we do see that as being the major success of the business, if you like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to say we're extremely proud, is an understatement. So, and we've got, my son's coming through the company now. I've got people that've been with us for 20 odd years and those sorts of things. And that's what that's what I say. That's what you're most proud of. So
Good on you, Loui. That's just wonderful. Wonderful. Look, I will say on behalf of Euros Hartleys, thank you very much for taking the time out to join us. I know you're extremely busy. Just having this chat, I know there could be 100 things you could be doing right now, but here you are spending time and sharing what is an amazing story, and there's a lot more to go yet. So on behalf of all of us, all the best. Thanks for being on Finding the Front. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for taking the time and listening to. One thing I've always said is sometimes don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, but there's a lot more of them as well. But thanks, Tim. It's been a pleasure.
Good on you, Loui. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Euros Hartleys Finding the Front. This podcast is for general information purposes only. Please check out euroshartleys.com for more information. Euros Hartleys holds Australian Financial Services Licence 230052.